Hello and welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today we're here with Chief Wetzel of the University Circle Police Department in Ohio, over 38 years in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Wetzel.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess.
You're welcome. Well, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit because law enforcement is something that traces back all the way to your great grandfather in Sicily.
Yeah, Palermo, Sicily, kind of amazing. But before I even get moving, I just wanted to thank you and Paige just for all the work you've been doing. I think I'd be remiss. Just looking at some of the stuff you guys have done or gals have done, and the energy that you're putting into this is special because I'll tell you, it is needed. And you're obviously having an impact. And, just watching all these years of seeing, the damage done to officers and just recently learning about somebody in one of our local departments that committed suicide. It's tragic. We're just hearing way too much of that. So again, I just want to just get that out in front right away, just to thank you for what you're doing because this is special and it takes special people to want to do this.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate that. Yeah.
But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, my great grandfather was from Palermo, Sicily. Was a police officer there. Never knew him, obviously. And then my uncle, my mom's brother, was a Cleveland police lieutenant, and he worked during the riots in the '60s. And he was actually a World War II veteran and saw combat there. Then actually comes and starts working in the city of Cleveland and sees some crazy things there. So his was a life of service both to his country, the nation, and then his local community. And then I had the privilege of getting in this business as well and absolutely love it, even to this very day.
I love it. I mean, I can relate. My mom's brother is also a police officer outside of Chicago. He's retired
Okay.
now,
Yeah.
but definitely there's a passion. And would you
Mhm.
say that family has led you into the career? Was that
Yeah,
something
actually,
for you?
ironically, I was close with my one cousin growing up, his first cousins, and I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do. I was kind of thinking about possibly journalism. I do a lot of writing even to this day for national police publications and Canadian ones, and so that always was kind of in me. But he had mentioned when we were like 18 or 19 that he was thinking about being a policeman, and at that point, I had up to had never thought about that. And because we did so much together, I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I should do that too and try it. And man, once I got into it, it was never looking back, and it really is a special career, and it's sad and tragic today that this recruitment and retention problem is as bad as it is because this is really a special job, and it's never been more difficult right now to hire.
What challenges are you seeing with the retention? I mean, I know there's, leadership is a huge part in the retention. So
Yeah, and I talk a lot about that. I write a lot about that. I do a training class very specific to leadership and its impact on officers. But I will tell you, I give this story is when I started as a policeman in Beechwood years ago. There was like back then there was just so many people that were applying for these jobs, and I think there was like 405 people for three positions. It was just that was common. You really had to work hard to get those jobs then. So as the years went by, and then I left there after 31 years, I went and I knew it was trending down. When I went to Richmond Heights to be their chief there, I remember asking, like, where's the civil service list? Because we had to hire someone. And they handed me this sheet and it had like 25 names on it. And I was like, are you kidding me? 25 people. That's all that's up. This is a good paying department, good reputation. I couldn't believe it was that low. And maybe with a little hubris on my part, Jess, I thought, well, this old chief didn't know what he's doing. You need to get out there and you got to market. You got to learn how to brand. And I thought I just knew it all. So we started a Facebook page. I never had one. And we were just spreading the word about our department. We paid this young girl, a videographer, to put this really flashy video together about all the department. We pounded the pavement. We were pushing it so hard. And then when they gave me the results, it was like 24. I actually did worse. I couldn't believe it. Like that's how bad that was getting. So then when I was about to leave Richmond Heights after about 4 years, we gave our first ever lateral transfer test, which allows police officers from other departments to transfer quickly. And at that time, and this is kind of where the story ties in together, we had three positions available. So I thought it was ironic when I started, there were three. And now when I'm about to retire from that department, and thought I was retiring, there were three spots. So we gave this lateral transfer test. And I thought at that time we had tons of positive news stories. We really were getting out there. We had an excellent reputation. I thought, man, everybody's going to want to work for this police department. We had five people apply. I was like, five people. One of them had no business being a policeman anywhere, so he was instantly moved. Another one, had a technicality. But at one point, we literally had three people for three positions. And that's where this is getting particularly dangerous because if we don't get a check on this, there's going to come a point where we have three positions and one person applies. And then our entire service model is going to dramatically change because we will not be able to do all the things we used to do. In other words, someone may call and say, well, my house was burglarized, and they may say, well, is anyone there? And they're like, no, I checked, everything's gone. They're like, okay, good. We'll email you a report form. You can fill it out and send it back. And the homeowner may be like, well, isn't someone going to come and dust for fingerprints? It's like, no, you can if you want, but no, nobody, there's no one to do it. And it's tragic because we've never paid more of our tax dollars. The biggest budgets in police departments tend to be, or in cities tend to be police departments. So this is bad. This is, they're paying a lot of money for this service. And we're going to get to the point where they're not going to get a good return on that investment. And that, again, is where leadership has such a crucial role. And I talk about that a lot because there's a lot of fingers to point in this retention and recruitment problem. There really is. Major media really did a number on us from probably about 2015 on, was tragic. But unfortunately, I can tell you in all these years of this business, we need to point one of those fingers back at us, and it starts with leadership. They can put such stress on officers. And I always tell people that, this is the big thing now, officer wellness, and it's really couldn't come soon enough. And I wish it was back when I started. We never even heard of that word, officer wellness. It didn't even exist until probably the last 5 to 8 years in any, kind of strength, so to speak. But now it's a strong word. But I tell people some of the most officer unwellness comes right from the sergeant's office or the chief's office or the lieutenant's office. They are able to create so much internal stress. And I talk about that a lot in that book. So, but again, I really feel leadership. Happy cops equals happy customers. It's not the other way around. And we've got to understand that. And I think our leaders have really fallen short. And again, just there's plenty of good leaders out there. There really are, but they're not that many either. And this is tragic. Our guys deserve better.
Yeah, research does show that some of the stress or a good portion of the stress does come from the leadership versus sometimes being out on the streets.
Absolutely. I talk about this too a lot when I train these young sergeants and lieutenants. Instruct at a college, and I also instruct for this company. And when I have them in there, I always remind them, you've got to understand, you should come in every single day and expect to find mistakes. That's just what it is. It could be something as simple as a typo, or it could be the wrong address on a search warrant. But it's going to happen. And I'm not saying ignore the mistakes, mitigate them, fix them. Hopefully they learn from them. There's all kinds of growth that can happen with that. But you literally, and it sounds strange to them to hear that. Like, I mean, it's because we're human and that's to be expected. And I tell them the day that you come in and you don't find any mistakes, check your breath against a mirror because you died. Someone killed you, didn't even know it. Now you're suddenly in management nirvana. And boy, nobody makes any mistakes. Of course, because it's not real. And they've got to understand that. And leaders got to realize when you start riding someone and making their life miserable and really making them second guess everything, when they shed that uniform at the end of the day, they don't shed that problem. It goes home with them at their dinner table. They're thinking about it, eating. It's crossing their mind. How much trouble am I in? Am I going to lose my job? And they may go to their kids' sporting events, or they may go watch them at their choir concert, and they're literally thinking like, why are they doing this? I didn't sign up for this. This isn't right. And even just when they're laying down in bed, some of the last thoughts in their minds as they close their eyes is, am I going to even have a job tomorrow? It is unconscionable to me that these men and women that are leaders are doing this to our officers because they are causing them tremendous, tremendous stress, and that just eats at them all the time. And then they start second guessing themselves. So I point so much of a finger at us and these leaders that are doing this because I hate to say it, a lot of them don't care, don't think about it, are not even aware that those decisions you're making are affecting not just that officer, his wife or her husband, and their children. So, got to keep that in mind.
Thank you for sharing that.
What are the types of conversations or training that individual leaders or organizations can have in order to encourage positive, healthy leadership and reduce that stress that they're having on their team?
The training, we're just starting to see some real, we're seeing organizations like yours that are really getting out in front of this. And so this is kind of new, these type of things and what you're doing, which again, I commend. But there's not a lot of real topic specific things related to officer wellness and how to do this better. Mostly, to your point, it's a lot of conversations, and those conversations, those crucial conversations, are extremely important. And we've got to start asking ourselves, what are we doing? And it cannot be, Paige, a checkbox like, okay, I took care of officer wellness. This is not a one and done. This is a constant experience for leadership and officers because officers can be, I've seen it too over the years. A guy or gal can be running so smooth for so long, and all of a sudden they get punched in the face with some life, consequence, lose a loved one, or develop a disease or just really struggle with a work, you know, politic issue or possibly lose. And all of a sudden, then you see some exposures and some weak points. And that's why we have to be prepared for that. And we cannot have just think, well, I gave him a gym membership or I gave him this really cool health app. It's like that is not enough. It's coming through your office, just how you treat these officers. And again, a lot of the push with this book that I wrote and just in general with leadership is we have to put more on the officers. They've got those answers. They really do, especially when it comes to officer wellness. We need to listen to them more because we don't have all the answers. And some of the best ideas are coming from them on how to better handle this stuff and keep them healthy as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that, obviously wellness is something that's a priority for you. And you also talk a lot about culture. And I agree with you. I think that historically, and I would say, and maybe you had a different timeline, but I would say probably in the last 9, 10 years is when the conversation of wellness really started to come about. And then, of course, in the last 5 years, it's been more prevalent than it ever has before. But I think that that was the idea. It was like, well, how do we get as many programs as possible instead of focusing on the foundation? And I do think that programs help. I think that programs help in a lot of different areas. I think training helps in a lot of different areas. But if you don't have a solid foundation to stand on, it's not going to have the same impact that you're looking for. And so, what do you, maybe what is your definition of a healthy culture? And how can leadership or how can an organization start making those steps to create a healthy culture so that when you do start adding this programming on top of it, it can stick?
Yeah, I think one of the things is at the top again, so much starts at the top is being that example, in that sense, and being consistent in your messaging over time. That this is again not a one and done. I'm just going to say it, and okay, I did good. You really have to do that, and it also is in how you discipline. And I like to say correct more your officers when they make mistakes. That is huge on how they feel, whether they have that culture that's supportive. We're big on the servant's heart mentality. We're so particular about that. We want men and women that have a servant's heart that look at this and realize we're here to serve others. One of the things that we've done on our police department in both places that I was in charge is we bring in a lot of different speakers for roll call trainings. And there are a lot of people and organizations that don't mind coming out for free to literally talk to officers. We brought in people that talk about organic eating. We've brought in people about stretching, yoga, all kinds of different. We've had psychologists come in, and again, they're only talking for 20 to 30 minutes, and they get a couple roll calls. But that is huge because I found in training, especially Paige, as a trainer, and I've been to tons and tons of training. You go to an 8 hour class, a lot of times you might glean one good thing that comes through, and you sat there for 8 hours for that. What we're trying to do is condense that tighter and tighter so that we get those critical messages out in shorter roll call type trainings. So we do that. We also have wellness officers, assign specific officers whose role is to be a wellness officer, to be that confidant. Then we have chaplains. We have a specific policies that address wellness. So you're getting all this reinforcement, not just lip service. We
Yeah.
also do innovative things like we have competitions. We had our Ohio attorney, now he's the Ohio Attorney General. At the time, he was in charge of our director of public safety. He came in from Columbus to Cleveland, and we had this plank competition. Again, just little different competitions to encourage that. We're going to do an arm wrestling competition. We're going to do a tug of war competition. Again, and the proceeds are going to benefit an officer wellness charity that we've just learned about that tries to help in that area. So again, those type of things. And then also gyms. We have our own gym, but we also don't, we tell them train on duty. We look at this as a form of training. A lot of chiefs are reluctant to do that. In my eyes, Paige, when you go in a gym or you get on a treadmill on duty, it's no different than going to a range and putting bullets on paper. You are going in there when you're stronger and you're more fit. You're able to chase down bad guys quicker. You're able to defend yourself better because you're healthy. A lot of people just look at it as like, well, they're just working out and trying to stay in shape. That's training. That's exactly what, and we track it as training. At the end of the year, we have a list and show how many times we did that. That is supportive documentation about what we're doing to make our officers defendable in court. As a bonus, of course, it keeps them healthy because, again, we're paying them to work out. This idea, well, just go to the gym and work out. Well, they're busy as heck, especially the ones that are on 12-hour shifts. By the time they're done and they may drive 30 minutes home, they're exhausted and they've got to eat and see their family. They don't have time to get a gym workout in. Well, now they can do it on duty and we track it. It's such a win-win. It's a symbiotic relationship that leadership has with its personnel to develop and keep them healthy and safe.
I'm so happy that you related wellness to training. I've been saying this, anyone who's listened to this podcast for a long time, I've been saying this for 2 years on the podcast of saying one day I believe that this is going to be the case. I do believe that wellness and training are going to merge together and it's going to be considered training across the board. And I really appreciate you explaining the why behind it and how that relates to the job specifically. I do think that sometimes when we say wellness and we kind of have two different silos for training and wellness, that one takes priority over the other, or maybe one has a stigma and the other one doesn't. And so combining them and saying, hey, this is training. This does contribute to performance on the job. This does contribute to safety on the job and longevity. And it's a win-win, and that you're tracking it and you're considering it as training. I really appreciate you saying that because that's another person who's in the same corner as me because I've been saying this for 2 years. But I appreciate you giving the why.
I will tell you too, Paige, there is still significant reluctance with a lot of police chiefs to do that. I know there's some head scratching when I first will explain this in some of these trainings. They just kind of look at me like I got three heads. It's like, what? And then other officers are like, well, we need to do that. And they try to, send that back. One of the things I remember early on in my career where there was that reluctance to do that, even let guys work out on duty, was this line of, well, if they get injured, it's a workman's comp, this and that. It's like, are you kidding me? There are, in my long time of lifting and in the martial arts and all the different things I did, I rarely saw an officer get injured while doing what they got injured on was chasing someone, blowing out a back car. And if they were in better shape, that wouldn't happen. So you'd have a lot of your workman's comp claims from officers' injuries. I don't know if I ever remember any in 38 years where it was because a guy was in the gym at the
Yeah.
station. So it's not even consistent. It was just old school, pushback. And even officer wellness, there's still plenty of older ones that are like, that are a little dismissive of it or look at it as like weakness, like, oh, please, you got, I did this and we handled this. And in 2 days, I was back to work after a shooting. It's like, well, good for you. That it may have worked for you, but it's not working for everybody else. And there were a lot of suffering that has gone on. I'm sure you've heard the statistic. We lose 3 times as many to police suicide than we do to in the line of duty deaths. That is shocking. And now we're hearing a lot of them that are like retired. So they're not in those numbers, but I can tell you anecdotally, just locally in Northeast Ohio, we're hearing of this, and it's really shocking because for so many of them, there is zero warning. You're just like, what? Who? He? When? And that's a problem. There's something in the water, and we've got to fix this.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So thank you.
Yeah.
And
No, what
from
you're
my
doing, I think, is helping that.
yeah, from
Thank
my
you.
perspective, I do see that this being able to allow them to work out on duty can also prevent burnout. And then burnout, like with less burnout, that's going to lead to more retention, and solve that issue that we talked about in the very beginning.
Absolutely, absolutely. We also even started a program. We're trying to do it as a pilot program, but we want to allow officers to come in and we'd start their shift a little early, and then they can work with our DT instructor to just do ground grappling and defensive tactics on a mat, and that's part of training. And we're just trying to see if that'll take. Where again, you're paid to come in because a lot of them would love to go to a jiu-jitsu gym and train, but again, a cop's lives are super busy. I mean, they really are rotating shifts, working side jobs, trying to run a family or just live their lives. There's only so much time. I mean, that's a narrow window. And then to drive and go to those places, it's just difficult. So by doing again on duty and integrating all of these things, particularly because so many departments are on 10 and 12-hour shifts, You don't need to just bury them out there for, 12 hours of driving around and taking calls. Get them out, get them trained, and do it while they're being paid. You're going to get better buy-in from that. And again, it shows the department's commitment. As to your earlier thing about, what do you do when it comes to wellness? That's that reinforcement, that consistent reinforcement of we're taking this serious. This is not lip service. We're gonna deliver, and it's not a one and done. I see so much of the check marks, and it's like that is it. That is not enough.
Mhm.
Yeah, what is something you've implemented that you've been really proud of that's helped with some of those unnecessary stressors?
And I think this was somewhat unique to what we did in Richmond Heights and what we're doing now is bringing in those volunteers that come in and do these roll call trainings. I can just tell you, I've just seen over the years what's worked and what doesn't work when it comes to leadership and how to treat officers and the results. And I really feel that these roll call trainings it's a community policing connection too, because what we're doing is we're bringing people from the community to come in and help officers. And that's why I said earlier, they all will do it for free. They're actually, and these are, high-end professionals that have a high hourly rate or would charge for this type. But when they say we're doing it for the cops and it's only going to be like 20 to 30 minutes, they will make the time. They actually agree and support what we do. So that's community policing big time. That's connecting us with the community. And then on top of it, so I would say the roll call trainings are some of the things that I really feel the best about because again, it's not an us versus them. We're all in this together. This is a we experience to help our public servant guardians, our cops and firemen and medics to keep them healthy and safe because they're going out and serving others. So when everybody's working together like that to keep us health and safe, that's a good thing. That's a win-win. So I really particularly like that because again, you get a lot of interesting speakers that come in and cover so many different topics. So it keeps it interesting for the officers. You can only have someone come in and so much talk about, legal updates and things like that. After a while, they're just, so we want them to have these kind of vibrant type of trainings.
And you're also an author. You wrote a book called A Cop and a Coffee Cup.
Yes.
What's the story behind the coffee cup?
This is the neat thing about it, cops and coffee. I mean, we're just, and donuts, of course, too, but that's not the best thing to promote. But, there is coffee is so integrated in what we do, because of the shift work and a lot of roll calls. That's oftentimes where officers will have their coffee. And a lot of times, we call kissing cars, we pull up next to each other and we're having a cup of coffee. And this book was designed with that in mind, knowing how cops and coffee are. And what it really is designed to do, and this is the easiest way to describe it because it's a short book and it was done deliberately that way because, again, I just know how busy people are. But the thinking was if you had an old, say, sergeant or chief or anybody that's retiring or about to retire, and he's got a young upcoming, say, supervisor that's interested in leadership, if he had one chance to sit down over a long cup of coffee and he's only got that one shot to say as much as he thinks is critical that he wants to pass on to that young, supervisor that's important for leadership and management of police personnel, what should he say? Well, this
Mhm.
book is what he should say. It's short and it gets right to the point. And the feedback I'm getting from people that have read it, particularly retired leaders, is I wish I had this book when I was doing a job because it really just zones in real heavy on the officer and it ties in really well with officer wellness because a strong focus is putting on using these officers and letting them get their full potential and relying on them and listening to them, and they have the answers. Unfortunately, with leadership, there's a certain hubris that comes with it, unfortunately, for too many, where they really believe just they have all the answers, and they don't. And they're reluctant to listen to somebody else. So this book was designed to say, listen, start listening to those men and women under your direction because they're holding the answers that you want. And it was a really interesting thing. And it was part of the inspiration of this book is I went to a training class when I was a young leader, and I'll never forget it. It was like a 3 week intensive leadership training class. And there was an instructor that came in, and this is not a styrofoam cup, but he came in with like a white foam coffee cup. And he held it up in front of the class right at the beginning. And he said, all right, you all have 10 minutes to write 10 things you can do with this coffee cup. You can write on it, you could break it up, you can smash, you have total creative license, so to speak. But you got 10 minutes, write 10 things down. So we all started writing. There's about 30 some people in the class. And I remember getting to about seven and thinking, man, I don't know what else you could really do with this thing. I mean, I remember thinking, well, I could break it up and use it as a shim. I'm like, oh, I'm so smart, but it was like, I don't even know if I got to 10. So all of a sudden he hits the bell, bing, and then while we were writing this down, he was walking around the class, hanging up these big, like sticky note type, note sheets all around the class. So as we're writing, we're looking like, what is he doing? So then he'd run through the class. He'd go, okay, Tom, give me your 10. And I'd write, if I had 10, write them down. And then he'd go, okay, Jess, give me your 10. And you write them down. And maybe three of ours or seven of ours were exactly the same, but some of them were different. And then he'd go to the next person. And what happened is he filled this chart with so many different ideas. And you can see the light bulbs going off like, oh, I see and what he was trying to teach us is you don't have all the answers, but look at if you only listen to the men and women under your direction, if you gave them a chance to share that stuff that they have, they're going to give you great ideas. And as a leader, and I talk about this in the book, you need to be an idea incubator. You got to be a person that allows this officer to develop these good ideas and help them with them. Be a fertilizer. Give them a chance to grow these things. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't going to work, but at least give them a shot to do it. So again, we need to realize we have this treasure of like wisdom and experience and knowledge in these roll call rooms if we're only willing to listen. And when we do develop officers and give them a chance and find those square pegs for the square holes and give them a chance to blossom, that is a form of officer wellness because when you feel good about what you're doing and how you're, having an impact on this police department, you feel good. There's an endorphin high from that and it just gets them better buy-in and just because again, this is not a sprint in police work. It's a marathon as evidenced by me. I'm doing it as long as I have.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that story.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
I think I think going back to a couple things that you said is everyone wants to feel seen, they want to feel heard, they want to feel valued. And when we can show up for other people and we can show them that they have value within the organization or just in your life, it doesn't even have to be from a professional perspective. This could be a personal perspective too. I do think that that is wellness. I do think that that does create longevity in our lives and in our careers. And so I appreciate you talking about that because I think we've all been in that position before, where we felt like we weren't valued and we were maybe just another number or another cog in the machine. And so for you to say, hey, I see you, I value you, I care about what you have to say, I want you to bring ideas to me, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to try. Maybe not everything's going to work out, but I'm here for you and you're important to me. That's the environment where people want to show up. That's the environment where people are excited to go to work.
No, no, you're absolutely right. I remember, when I teach a lot of these classes, there's this generational gap I'll see with, I may see officers from my generation or even older than mine, and you'll see, millennials, and now we're just working our way down. And it's interesting, they all have a certain uniqueness. They all bring something different to the table, but they all are unique in their own way. And we just need to be willing to listen. And I think from leadership's perspective, there's always been a reluctance to listen. After a while, they start to believe their own press clippings. They seem to think that they have all the answers and they don't. And then they, over time, just start to not pay as much attention. And these young men and women that are coming into this job now have really high expectations and they demand more than we ever did. Oftentimes, I remember listening when I do a training class, I'd hear some of these old timers complaining like, oh, these millennials are always asking why, always asking why. And it's like, I get it, but you know what? We should have asked why more. We would just do stuff like, I don't know, okay, and you do it, and it's like, why are we doing this? This is a waste of time. This is something we did maybe in the 1950s or something, where it has no bearing today, but because that's just the way we always did it, we just keep doing it. And it was good that they were asking those questions. We shouldn't be afraid when someone says, why are we doing this? I'm glad they asked because I have a reason for why we're doing this. And all of them have so much to offer. And when they feel like they're contributors to their organization, because again, they can move. Police officers today, Paige, whether people realize it or not, have never been more marketable in the history of the American policing model than they are now. We're poaching each other's constantly from departments. They're offering signing bonuses. We never heard of signing bonuses. Someone had told us back then, we're going to give you $5,000 to come here. You'd be like, what? that is very commonplace now because there's just only so many of them. So we're really competitively working to get those good ones. And I remember a trainer once said, we used to have a recruitment pool. Now we have a recruitment puddle. But in
Mhm.
that puddle, you can still find some really, really good people, but we have to work hard and they have high expectations. And if we don't deliver for them, they're just going to go somewhere else. Their feet will do the talking.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that and Jess and I talk about this all the time, so she'll probably like know what I'm saying, but I really believe that we should always be in the pursuit of progress. How do we continue to improve ourselves? How do we continue to improve the things that we do? How do we continue to learn? How do we continue to grow, evolve? And I think that it takes a lot of self-assessment, everything that you were talking about before, especially if you're in a position of leadership, to ask yourself those questions. Am I being open and receptive to learning other things, or have I closed myself off to new ideas? Am I listening to people? Am I showing up in a way that's productive and positive? And we have to have those moments. And sometimes those moments are daily, sometimes they're weekly, monthly, quarterly, but Jess and I talk almost every day about, how can we be better as individuals? How can we be better as professionals? And I think that the biggest, and I'll speak like I'm a Gen Zer right now, but the biggest flex is to be teachable and to continue to grow. And so I feel like this entire conversation has been that. It's like, how do we continue to evolve in a positive direction? How do we have a bigger, more positive impact on people? And one of the things you said earlier that I definitely wanted to just kind of circle back to was this idea of action. And you said a couple times, making sure it's not a check the box, making sure it's not a lip service. And there's a quote that I love, and it says, education without action is just a meeting. And I use this a lot in presentations that I do because my hope is that through this podcast, through all of the trainings that you guys go through, all of the, law enforcement and first responder conferences, everything that we are doing to have these critical conversations and to continue furthering our education, that it doesn't just end there, that there's an actionable component to the end of that, and that we are actually trying to make a difference in what we're doing and not just talking about it. Because we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but is that going to create positive change? No. I think it creates more awareness, and I think that's good, but positive change requires action. And so I appreciate you bringing that up a couple times, and I think it's a really good reminder to all of us. Are we just talking about stuff, or are we actually doing it?
Right, right. No, absolutely.
The last thing that we're going to ask you, and I really love the premise behind your book because that is basically why I started this podcast in the first place. I was having a lot of conversations with leadership, and they were all telling me I wish statements. They were telling me their stories of, I wish I would have known this. If I would have done this, maybe it would have been better. I wish, I wish, I wish, and in my mind, I was like, how do we get that out to people? Because it's pure gold. Our experiences and things that we've gone through and the lessons that we've learned, are so valuable to the younger generation. And so my initial hope with this podcast was that we could inspire the education, or excuse me, inspire the younger generation to be more proactive and to learn from people who've done it before them. And it's really evolved because we now have a lot of leadership who listens to the podcast, and they're getting just as much value out of it as the younger generation. But my final question for you is, if you could sit down with the younger version of yourself, with that younger generation, and share your words of wisdom, what would they be?
I really, and I when I, did the pre-study for this, I was very intrigued by that because I thought that that's a great thing. And on my desk, I have a quote that I think, is from Psalm 37:3. It just says, "Trust in the Lord and do good." Whether you're religious or not, the second part especially is do good. I think we never should lose sight of the fact that we are here to do good. And I think sometimes it does get lost over the years, and you get some curmudgeoniness with the job or frustrations and see all the politicalization that takes place. There's a lot of things that you could get really, really frustrated with. And then particularly in 2015, when there was this effort that really almost made us to be the bad guys, which was stunning to me that they were able to actually sort of accomplish that to some degree in some minds. was really tragic. And I think a lot of us were losing sight. We are here to do good, and this is an amazing job to be able to do good. Every day when I'm driving in, there's a lot of times I'm just thinking, what can I do good for the officers or what can I do good for the community? This is a wonderful opportunity and a job that you literally can come in. And a policeman, whether he's a patrolman or dispatcher, they can all think of ways to do good to serve the communities that they're part of. So I think that is just great advice for anyone. It's just, trust in the Lord and do good. This job is about doing good. And that in itself, if you really feel that you're having an impact and doing good, there's a wellness perspective in that as well. Because when we feel good about what we're doing and know that we're having an impact, which we are unequivocally, that's a great thing.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
No, absolutely.
Thank you for coming on the podcast today. We really appreciate your time and thank you for everything that you're doing in wellness and within your organization. And everyone, say the book name one more time to anyone
Sure,
who
it's a
is listening.
cop and a coffee cup, some simple, plain spoken wisdom for police leadership in the 21st century. The nice part about this book, too, Paige and Jess, is it can be read by really anyone in any leadership position. Because I've had people tell, one was a teacher and said, this would be great for just the entire teaching profession. With the words in there are consistent with so much, but in our job in particular, because it's so many of the demands that we have and the toll that it takes on us, this is kind of important. So you can get people can get it on, Amazon or Barnes and Noble online, and it's just a good thing. And even people that are not police officers can really learn a lot because they get an inside baseball view of what policing is like and that culture. Because again, they're the ones that are paying for this, and so it gives them a little window into the culture and the mindset, and what I think is so critical. I really believe too, Paige, that if this was read by every police leader and every police officer, we could really bring our profession to a higher level. I think on a national perspective, we're probably like a B minus because I do a lot of teaching. If I was given grades, it'd be a B minus, which isn't bad, but we should be striving for an A plus. And a book like this and an attitude like this and a culture that this book promotes could get our policing profession to its best level ever in my eyes.
Thank you. We really appreciate your time. Thank
Oh,
you so much
thanks.
for coming on here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the privilege.
Of course.